Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. I have another episode of RetroGrade for you this week, and this time I'm taking a look at a Data East arcade classic, Midnight Resistance. It was initially released in 1989 and featured a rotating joystick used for aiming, which helped set it apart from other run and gun shooters of the time, such as the Contra series. The game also borrowed a concept from another Data East title, Heavy Barrel, where you collected red keys from certain enemies in order to spend them opening lockers at regular intervals for better guns, extra ammo and other power-ups. As per usual for this series, I am starting with the arcade version first, but this time I'm afraid I had a few problems with this game. Firstly, the controls. By default, the game will be expecting the same rotating joystick that was featured on the actual hardware, which of course you won't have, so you will be stuck aiming forwards the whole time. I have no doubt that it is possible to get into the main settings and change the controls so that aiming is mapped to the right stick, but unfortunately it wasn't something I was able to do for the purposes of this video. There were also issues with the sound, as the music seemed to be playing two channels at different timings, which ended up sounding like a horrible garbled mess by the end of the stage. I will try not to hold these things against the game too much, but the control issue really is a problem by the time you get to the end of the stage, as you need to be able to fire all around you to deal with gun emplacements, cogs, and the boss tank. It would be great to be able to play this arcade version when using a second stick to aim. Capcom did it for Forgotten Worlds on their PS2 collection, so if a similar Data East collection ever comes out, or if they sell this game individually on the consoles, hopefully this will be sorted out. Overall, I'm afraid I will have to award the arcade version of Midnight Resistance a score of 2 grenades out of 5. Switching over to the Amiga version next, this is not a terrible effort by special effects by any means, but not the best out of the home versions that I'm going to be looking at. The in-game graphics are incredibly dark, and I'm not sure why. The intro screens were bright enough, and it's just the game itself that looks wrong. The controls are a lot easier than the arcade version because you simply point where you want to shoot, although because up is jump, which is common in computer games of the time due to a lack of buttons on most joysticks, you can accidentally kill yourself by jumping into enemy fire or the path of a tank when you meant to stand up or shoot upwards. In terms of the sound, during the majority of the game you just get music, which is an okay rendition of the arcade tunes, but there are better versions to come. When you get to the weapon lockers, there is a little bit of speech to be heard, although they haven't used samples for each of the different weapons like in the arcade version. You just get the same weapon voice sample each time. Overall, the dark and muddy graphics really do let this version of the game down, making it feel drab and lifeless. I would have to award it a score of 3 grenades out of 5. Let's move over to the Megadrive Genesis port next. Straight away, this is a big improvement because the graphics are nice and bright with plenty of colour, and there's a nice amount of detail too. If anything, I would say that they are slightly improved over the arcade original. This version of the game plays pretty well, but I'm not a fan of the checkpointing. If you run out of lives, you are chucked back to the previous weapon locker rather than simply reappearing where you died, like in the arcade original. This makes progress considerably more difficult despite being given multiple difficulty settings in the options menu. If I had played this version back in the day, I think I would have quite enjoyed it if I could get anywhere in it. This is actually the first time I've played it though, so I have no nostalgia towards it at all. The version of the soundtrack is nice and upbeat and makes a very good use of the Megadrive sound chip. This is my second favourite version of Midnight Resistance, and I would give it a score of 3.5 grenades out of 5. Finally, I have saved my favourite version for last, which is the C64 version. I do have a lot of nostalgia for this particular port of the game, a lot of it because of a certain demo that was on a Commodore format power pack. It was a very short part of the beginning of the first stage that just looped over and over until you ran out of lives, but I loved it and played that thing to death. Coming back to the C64 version today for the purposes of this video, I still think it plays the best out of all the versions I've looked at. It uses the same control scheme as the Amiga version, yet for some reason it feels a lot better. Accidental deaths did still happen sometimes, but they were a lot less of a problem in this version. While the graphics are of course the weakest of the bunch due to being 8-bit rather than 16-bit, I do still think they are very good considering the limitations of the hardware, and special effects have captured the layout and feel of the arcade game very well. Finally, there's the music, which is an absolutely stonking rendition of the same tunes found in the other versions. You may well disagree with my opinion on this, and that's fine, but the C64 version of Midnight Resistance is still my favourite one by far, and I'm giving it a score of 4 grenades out of 5. So there we go. I don't think Midnight Resistance is as well known as it deserves to be, yet I do know C64 owners remember it quite fondly like I do, especially if they played that Power Pack demo. I intend to get back to the A to Z of Amiga next week, and just to keep you updated on PS2 Tuesdays, my plan is to get all of the 6 remaining episodes of Season 4 made during December, and then release them from January onwards. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. In the meantime, take care.